Have you wondered what financial advisors actually think about finances? This is your sneak peek at the conversations within Financial Design Studio. Michelle Smollenberger, the CEO here, will be your host as you go behind the designs.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Designs, where we share the perspectives of different professionals to help you live more and give more. Today, we are going to talk to the experts when it comes to hosting parties. Hosting parties and people at your home can be such a great way to use your money to build a community around you. However, for those that don't host often, this can be overwhelming. So our goal with this episode is to introduce you to some professional celebrators who will teach us how to host holiday parties the right way. Today's going to be a great episode. I'm really excited for you guys to listen in. So I'd like to introduce you to our friends, Chris and Kathy Seachek. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having us, Michelle.
Good morning, Michelle.
Yeah, we're so glad that you're here. I know this can be like nerve-wracking when you're on the other side of the microphone or the other side of the speaker rather than listening to the episode. So this is going to be fun. You guys kind of see what it looks like now. So something you should know is Chris and Kathy are both retired, which means they are in the middle of their busy season. Between hosting parties, celebrating holidays, and spending time with family, their schedules are packed with good, fun things. So we're calling you these professional celebrators in your busy season right now. I love this because most professionals kind of have this busy season, right, where there's so much going on. But why don't you guys kind of start by telling us a little bit about yourselves? We know, you're retired. Why don't you kind of share what you did professionally, like during your careers, and then maybe kind of what retirement has been like?
Sure. So Chris and Kathy, right? We've been married coming up on 25 years next March, right? We met in grad school where, of course, I did all the work and she did all the copying. That's a whole nother story, right? We were both CPAs, and we both had long careers with the individual companies for which we worked for. I think you were 39 years with UL, right?
35, yeah.
35. I was 29 years with a company called Komatsu. And so we've had great careers, and we are so looking forward to continuing our retirement. And then, of course, with FDS, right, being in charge, we think that we can continue to do that. Right? So
Absolutely.
Michelle and company.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And you guys have kind of shifted into, so you had these professional careers where you were both working and you have kids, so raising kids, and now you're kind of shifting into retirement where you don't have to go to work full time every day. So just, I think that transition in itself can take a while because kind of the initial of, okay, wait, we're at home. Now what? Would you describe it as kind of like easy, different than you thought? And I know this is like a whole other episode, but just, if you were to kind of sum it up, what do you feel like that transition from?
Well, I would say it is great, highly recommended, but it is not really what I expected at all. For sure, no more work stress is an unbelievable burden that's been lifted.
Yeah.
No more Sunday scaries.
No more Sunday night scaries.
No checking email on your vacation or no dreading to go back to work after a trip. But, I think we expected we'd be reading books and just watching movies in the afternoon. I was going to start playing the piano again. And other than a couple of jigsaw puzzles and maybe a few more books, we just haven't gotten around to the sitting and relaxing parts.
Yeah.
I think we found it's a more relaxing pace, more self-care, more exercising, more sleep, and more time as a couple. So more traveling, more talking to each other. Dinners, you can actually watch a TV series at night. They have so many great little TV series.
Yeah, in my case, right, the one thing that has really surprised me was the fact I did not expect I would be as busy as I am. Right? Now, some of that is my own doing, right? But some of it, you just, I thought at 2 p.m. that I'll have time. I'll go and watch a movie that I, wrote down and did not see over the last 10 years, right? And I've got a list of all those movies. But that hasn't happened yet. And we've been retired 2 years now. I've been more like 3. But it is amazing at how busy each and every day has become, right? I still get up relatively early just because that's in my nature. But I'm not like sitting around reading the newspaper, enjoying coffee till 10 a.m. Oh, no, there's an agenda to be done each and every day. And I go and I tackle that.
I do feel like I've started a second career
Yeah.
in party and travel planning. Since we've been retired, our younger daughter got married. Our older daughter had our second granddaughter and bought a house. We've had a bunch of family parties we've gone on, many trips. We are professional celebrators.
Yeah.
We're not professional party planners. We just try to have a good time and make everyone feel welcome. So I think, Michelle, you've placed us on a pedestal I'm not sure we belong on. But, we're going to try our best to share what we have done and what we know and, just talk about celebrating holidays and all year round.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's how this came up, because I feel like that's what you kind of mentioned in a meeting was, I feel like I've become this like professional party planner. And we're like, oh, that's so great. So one of the things like with our business, our tagline is designed for life. And the reason for that is because, yes, there's all these finance things. Yes, there's all these decisions you have to make with what to do with your money, how to spend it well, how much do I want to pay in taxes. But the whole reason that we enjoy doing what we're doing is because it allows you to live life. And we could go so in depth with this, but life is really enjoying your time with your family, with people you love, and enjoying exactly with what you're talking about. So it's so great to hear that you guys are doing this. And that's really the goal of today, I think, with all of us, is just to encourage people to be able to go out and do this themselves. And so you guys, you may feel like I'm putting you on a pedestal. You guys are doing this well. And so I think it'll be fun to hopefully encourage other people to do it too in hearing your stories.
Well, the very first question you asked us was, what is it you want to do from here?
Yeah.
And how do we help you get there? And, that was just an amazing revelation. It wasn't about a number. Yeah. It was about what do you want your life to be? Yeah. And so far, I think we're doing a good job on that in retirement, but we have so many more things to do.
That's so great. This is good. All right. Well, that's so helpful to kind of hear kind of your story, like professionally and in your careers, and now kind of that you're enjoying retirement and what this looks like. So we're going to talk about this specific piece. So why don't you kind of share with us, have you always enjoyed celebrating the holidays, or have you always kind of, had parties? And that's one piece of like just enjoying the celebrating, because we all, at Christmas time, we're either going somewhere or people are coming to us. But then that second part of how did you kind of get started hosting? So if you want to kind of tackle those couple of questions.
So, even as a youngster, right? I mean, Christmas was, just the pinnacle of celebrations, right? As soon as Thanksgiving was over, I was ready to put up the Christmas tree. Let's get out all the boxes. Let's put the stuff all out, right? And so Christmas to me is always been as I call it, the pinnacle of celebrations, right? But Halloween, right? So I would say back starting around 2000, right? When I moved into Hawthorne Woods and all that. Halloween was, it was great. You would throw up a couple blow up outside, right? To kind of just be a little festive. And then it started just to escalate, right? And because everyone does Christmas outside and that. So, I mean, you usually get the entire neighborhood, that becomes festive and all that. But nobody does Halloween. Right. And so then I started to find myself that Christmas was starting to decline, and the effort in celebrating Halloween was growing. Right. And so now today, Halloween, I think, is my favorite holiday in which to celebrate, only for two reasons. One is that because nobody else really does Halloween kind of like we do Halloween. And then two, right, I have the effort, to put forth come October. We get to December, I'm exhausted from Halloween. So it's kind of like, all right, I don't have as much energy as I once had, right? So Christmas gets scaled back just a little. So I've always, ever since, getting back to the point, I've always enjoyed, Christmas, even Halloween too, right, as a kid.
Yeah.
And for me too, it really started all the way back with my grandparents.
Okay.
My grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins have spent every holiday together, and they always did. And it wasn't just the birthdays, and it wasn't just the big holidays like Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Easter. I mean, we celebrated the 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day, and the Kentucky Derby. I mean, we would have these pools where everyone, even as a kid, throw in $1, everyone would pick a name out of a hat, and then we would all watch the Derby. It was so fun. I have a 77-year-old aunt that I have spent every Thanksgiving and Christmas of my life with.
Wow.
And they were loving and wonderful people. And their parties or gatherings weren't fancy at all. But it was just getting the people together and all of us being together. And those traditions have carried forward. My father loved holidays. Absolutely loved them. My parents threw great parties. They had an absolutely amazing Christmas tree. Beautiful, classy decorations. Always set the dining room table with the white tablecloths, the glassware, the name tags, the favors. I mean, really went all out in a way that people don't, us included, go very often anymore. And there was always singing or activities or 4th of July. It was St. Patrick's Day. It was wonderful people that they would bring together, great food. And they focused on the details, I think. They had special serving bowls. They always had special tablecloths and napkins and just little details like that. And we knew that when the 2-tier china serving dish came out at Christmas, the Fannie Mae and the little white papers was coming soon, because my mom would always have this 2-tier dish of the chocolates for the company, that was coming.
And one story that I reflected on when we were prepping for all this, right, is that my grandparents, too, they loved to entertain, right? And I remember so many of the holiday parties that we had. They would set up shop in the basement. They had a regular family room style, and then they had their kind of back area, and they had this ping pong table, right? And on the ping pong table, they would set up all the food as kind of a buffet.
Yep.
And back then, we're talking probably in the 70s, right? It wasn't about the desserts. It wasn't about the main course, right? It wasn't about the appetizers, the cheese tray and all that. It was about the Jell-O mold, right? It was how fancy can you make the Jell-O mold, and what ingredients are you putting in there? I mean, that was what you got judged on, was the Jell-O mold, right? And so, I mean, just great, great stories and memories.
Wanting and liking to entertain and host is one of the things that Chris and I have always bonded over, and we have always had in common. And this Jell-O mold thing is one of those things. My mother had a special Jell-O mold, a special plate. She always had to put sherbet in it and fresh fruit, or canned fruit if it was fruit cocktail. And then she would always have these special flowers. I mean, she would decorate these Jell-O molds with Christmas flowers, and they were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And in a way that people don't necessarily do today.
What's interesting is I feel like these were things that you saw people doing throughout your whole life. And like you're saying, this is like every reason or chance to celebrate. If there's, a holiday on the calendar, whatever it is, we're going to get together and celebrate. Was it always family related?
Very, very often it was family, but it also included different groups of people. So coworkers of my dad, friends that they had from the schools or the church, close neighbors. Every Christmas we had the priest and all the nuns come. So, it was eclectic. It was a lot of different people, but very family oriented. And, it's funny, the less my parents knew the people, the more formal and preparation, there would be.
That makes sense, too, because on one hand, and I know you guys are going to talk about this, but depending on who you invite can totally set the tone, I'm sure, for how the party's going to go. Who am I going to talk to? What are we going to talk about? What can't I talk about? I'm sure guests think about all of these things, but that completely makes sense. But I just love hearing kind of how this has just been part of your life. And you're kind of like now assuming this role, almost like kind of stepping into, our parents did this, and now we're kind of doing this. So your kids might be looking and thinking at you guys, of you guys of like, oh, now my parents, have done this. So that's really cool.
And actually, in prepping for this podcast, so one of the things that dawned on us was that we are starting to carry on the family traditions of our parents and our grandparents, and that when we do this and how we do it, it's going to impact how our children and their children either do or don't carry on the family traditions. And I think, in getting ready for this, we decided that, it is important to us to have those traditions carry on.
Even with our own 2 daughters, right, I believe that they understand the traditions, right, that we have set. They're not quite ready to take over yet, but I think that when they are pushed to do so, hopefully not for a while yet, that they will continue. It's almost inevitable.
Yeah. I just think it's exciting that you guys kind of see the importance in it. And I'm sure at some level, like we all agree that kind of having these parties and just these gatherings of people coming together, it strengthens your family, those relationships. The more you're together, the more you're experiencing together. And so, yeah.
Right. It's the memories too. And that when you reflect on those memories, you know you've done something good.
Yeah. All right. So that is what we're going to start talking about is we're going to hear about some of these legendary parties. We'll call them. I love how we're making everything sound amazing. But it is funny that usually when it's just you know, and you're hosting the party, you're like, it's just our family party. Like, this is what we always do. But to other people, and I think this is kind of, you know, the challenge to everyone listening is that, you know, not everybody gets as excited. Not everybody thinks that the details matter as much. So I think it's really helpful for people to hear how everything that you're kind of, you know, this energy you're putting into planning these parties is, you know, really does make a difference in what people remember and those memories. So it's a good reminder, I think, for people to hear that. So why don't you kind of tell us, let's start with, if you can choose one of a favorite party, and it could be, you know, one for each of you or one that you both think was your favorite. Let's kind of start there.
So I wouldn't say that I have an exact highlight of a party, but certainly Halloween and the Halloween parties that we've had in the past, right, are certainly ones that I enjoy the most. Only because nobody else does Halloween parties. People do Christmas parties and birthday parties and that, but you don't usually find others doing Halloween parties. So from the dressing up in costume, right, which isn't a requirement for our parties, but it is strongly encouraged, right, to the theme, right, to the decorating the outside and all that. I mean, it just goes and it just highlights, right, that this is a party separate of your normal family gathering and all that. You know, it's just, to me, it's just a lot of fun. Yes, it's a lot of work and it is exhausting. And there's a lot of work that goes behind it. So we're not saying that we are true professionals that can just, you know, on a whim put together a party. But because we've done so many and we know what it takes to get through and organize and celebrate and all that, it does make it easier. But Halloween for sure is my, you know, favorite.
Yeah. And is that every year you have a Halloween party?
Multiple Halloween parties.
Okay.
Right, which we may get into in terms of the people that we invite to these parties, right? We tend to separate, you know, a family and other groups of people. But we do usually have multiple Halloween parties throughout the month.
All right. How many? How many is normal?
We didn't have as many as we've had in the past, but yeah, where we can hold multiple. Okay. Like one on a Friday, one on a Sunday, or one on a Friday, one on a Saturday. You know, as we've gotten a little bit older, we're not so inclined to do the multiple parties on a weekend. Yeah. But we certainly know how to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Right? When you're doing those and you have multiples, is it easier to do, like, if you're going to do a Friday and then a Saturday because you're kind of set up in party mode, like your house is set up, is it easier to then do a couple or have a break or just do one?
I find it easier to spread them out because it is easier just managing all of the food and cleanup preparation. I think our days of doing a Friday, Saturday, Sunday are just not going to be something we can do too much anymore. So I think I like to spread them out.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I think we have found, too, that when we've attempted a party where you have multiple factions of people, that it takes away from us doing what we would typically do during a party in terms of talking to people, you know, prepping the food, serving the food, right, prepping drinks, whatever, right, that we find ourselves trying too hard to try to introduce and keep conversations going amongst the various people, that it's easier for us, right, to separate those parties into 2 or 3 without having, you know, an open house type gathering. So,
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. All right.
I find it really hard to choose, you know, our favorite party because I don't think we had a favorite, but one of the groupings of parties that I've always loved is one started by my father and his sister, and it was their ideal to get our two families together at Christmas time, and they were very formal, you know, the white tablecloths and all the favors and big sit-down dinner and all of that. And it was their great hope that we would continue this tradition on through the generations. So once they passed, my first cousins and sisters decided that, yes, we did want to, but that we wanted to make it a little bit more casual. So we've gone more toward, lighter dinners or appetizers, but we also went to theme parties. So it started simple with wear your favorite Christmas hat party. And so that was great. But we've gone on to hosting, not all of these were done by us. It could have been, siblings or cousins. Christmas morning. So then everybody wears their pajamas and we have breakfast for dinner. The Nightmare Before Christmas, National Lampoon's Christmas, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, Christmas Story. Absolute favorite was French Christmas. And I do think my cousin, who loves France, was thinking berets and scarves, and there was a lot of that. But then we started to run out of ideas, and so some of us went as French fries or three French hens, and Chris and I went as French martinis. And so
we had a little plastic martini glass attached to
our headbands. Yeah.
That's so great.
So we have successfully carried on the tradition and honored our parents in doing that. And we've been able then to bring in the next generation because it's more fun for them. And we play games and, it's kind of a hoot.
Yeah, I think that's so great. It gives people so many ideas of like all of the different theme parties you can have. I think some of the funniest pictures I've seen from different family parties are when they dress up as characters from these movies, and they're so good. Like Uncle Eddie or Cousin Eddie from National Lampoons. These are so good. So
each of these I mentioned, it's full out costumes and all decorations and everything that goes through.
Yeah, that's so great.
Another thing I think is you have to be sometimes a little creative or flexible as things changed. And I think one of the ways we did that was when COVID struck. Our daughters went to U of I in Champaign, and they always have a mom's weekend down there. And we were in the, mode and tradition of going down there, but we couldn't during COVID. And so instead, Chris was able to, flex and made these great parties for us.
Yes, and so in order to fulfill that kind of weekend, right, of Mom's Weekend, whatever, we had everybody descend on our house.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, right? So we had a bartending 101. So I got behind the bar. They all sat on the other side of the bar, whatever, right? And I would, demonstrate to them, the different cocktails to make, right? A daiquiri, a margarita, right? An old fashioned, right? All those traditional type cocktails, right? I would show them how to use the bar utensils behind the bar, right? I would show them how to make garnishments, right? And so, they all thought that was great. It took about an hour and a half. The best part of it all is they got to enjoy the cocktails, right? Not just watch me make them. So that was one. Another one, we do wine tasting. The latest one we did was a blind wine tasting, right? Where I set up 4 bottles in the center of the kitchen table. We did this, right? And had glasses, and we poured each bottle right into the glassware in front of each and every one. And they had to determine, right, the cheapest wine to the most expensive wine. Right? And only I knew exactly which ones they were. And so it was great watching them, talk amongst themselves as, what do you think about this one? What do you think? And I would also give them the tasting notes. Right? Not the score of the wine, but just the tasting notes, right? Just to add a little more complexity to it all. And so what they did determine on their own was that they were going to decide amongst the group, right, which was the most expensive. Right? And what do you think they chose?
The cheapest, probably.
The cheapest.
That's what I was actually wondering.
So I'm like, oh my God, right? On the next party, right? Forget the wine that I typically serve. We're going with the $2 chuck. Right?
Exactly. I think one thing though that stands out is what makes some of these is just the creativity in it. So even, when you guys are kind of saying, you have your standard, holidays that are on the calendar, but then something like a Mom's Weekend where you're creatively thinking of something like, no, we still want to do this in some way. How can we do it? And so it's coming up with a way to do that. I think the creativity is what can make it so fun. And just, I think that's what a lot of times makes it so memorable. So Is there kind of like a list of kind of like your regular or annual parties that you have, kind of those traditional parties?
Yes. We have annually Halloween parties, Thanksgiving party, Christmas parties, 4th of July party, and we have those every year.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to note really on the Thanksgiving, right, we don't host Thanksgiving.
Okay.
But long ago, right, my daughter Emily, or our daughter Emily, right, complained about the fact that we don't have leftovers.
Oh.
Right? So that led to the discussion and the acceptance of hosting a mini Thanksgiving the day or two after, meaning Friday or Saturday. Right? And I'll tell you, it's anything but mini. There's the turkey, the stuffing, the mashed potatoes, the green bean casserole. It's everything, right? So it's, even though we joke about it being mini, it's the full 9 yards. And so, yeah, we do host Thanksgiving.
Now, when you guys do, when you host like any of those and you have leftovers left, do you guys like having leftovers? So yourselves, do you like having the leftovers, or are you kind of like, no, you're trying to send them home with guests?
Both.
Okay.
My grandma was one of those 2 meat Sunday grandmas. And so we are notorious for making way too much food.
Yeah.
And we would be mortified if there wasn't enough food. And so we go way, way over in the other direction. And we just don't have dinners. We have a full island full of appetizers. And we have a dinner generally for the big holidays. And we have dessert, another big array. And so we send it home with whoever can take food home or wants food.
Yes.
And then, lucky for me, Chris is a very good leftover eater.
Yeah.
And so we eat leftovers, until we can't because they're good anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, Michelle, a lot of our gatherings, we have overnight guests.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Typically family, but there can be one or two that stay over. And I think something that we enjoy, and Kathy more specifically, right, is that come the following morning, either we have a breakfast casserole, or the fact is that we take all the leftovers, bring them out so everyone can eat, and we tell the stories about what happened the previous night, and just kind of revisit that whole gathering and stuff like that. And I think it's great, right? Because not everybody's part of every conversation, right? So some things that you heard about this family, oh my God, they were doing this, right? We get to all of a sudden reconvene and talk about it.
Yep, exactly. No, I think that's great. I think that's one of the things, when people think back maybe to like, people could probably remember like their wedding day. And that was probably something, it goes so fast and you do all this planning, but the day goes so fast and you don't remember and you each saw different things. I think that was the thing I remember the most is Steve and I afterwards, like on your honeymoon, you're talking about all the stuff that happened for days that happened that one day. And that's kind of like what you're saying is really, like we said, the memories. So now it's talking about what happened, which can be just as great as when it happened. You're still laughing as hard. So that's great. That's
and it's funny you mentioned that because in addition to like all the traditional parties we have all sorts of parties. Like our younger granddaughter turned 1, so we had her birthday party at our house. And speaking of after weddings, for both daughters, we had the day after wedding parties, brunches or sandwiches or whatever, just so that people could reminisce. And these parties were 50 or 60. We had our older daughter's rehearsal dinner, at our house, and ended up having a pig roast. I mean, so we're always doing something else and trying to figure out what would work well for the family and what's going on with all the different members of the family. Yeah.
I think that's great. And we'll talk about a little bit later. We're going to talk about like, how do you think about, okay, if this is how many people we're going to have, what do we do and what's the food? So we're going to get into all those details to help people. We're talking about how you guys are kind of setting up parties now and you have more time now, but when you were working full time, were you still hosting back then like you are? And what was that like when you were working to try and plan for these?
So I would say that, yes, we do, back then when we were working and raising the kids, whatever, right? We certainly had as many parties as we have today, right? The difference is that we had a shorter runway.
Yeah.
Now we have a much longer runway to prepare in that. But before it was short. So everything was concentrated, right? our prep time was concentrated, our discussion time was concentrated, our execution was concentrated, right? And we just, basically hit the ground running, and it's like, okay, they're going to be here at 4:00 today. Boom, boom, boom. We got to get this done. It's much easier now to execute that plan.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think back about it now, and we just stayed up really, really late, and we got up really early a lot.
Yeah.
And we would have to schedule our errands so that it would be, okay, we're going to get decorations on Monday. We're going to Costco on Tuesday. We're going to the grocery store on Wednesday. We're going to start food prep on Thursday. I mean, you you had to stay up until it got done because that was today's.
Yeah, or you're like picking things up on the way home from, it's like you're trying to figure out, when you can kind of do that. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, no. What was it like hosting with kids? So kind of younger kids, and then as they got older, do you feel like it changed hosting?
Well, I mean, having kids at the parties just adds to the chaos,
Yeah.
But, and especially with some of the timing because, as they were, in middle school and even elementary and high school, they were very busy with activities. So we're trying to fit all that in as well. Yeah. But we did always include them in the parties and not just our kids. So, I mean, everybody's welcome, at the house. And so that was always nice. And then we did, as they got to be a little bit older, try to draw them into trying to help us prep for the party. Not only because we could use the extra hands, but also because we want them to know how to do it in the future, and we want them to think about carrying on these traditions, later.
Yeah.
I've always included the kids. I don't think we've had many like adult-only parties. I can't think of, when we would have shipped
maybe
them
like
out.
a work Halloween party or something. And now our daughter who has children, she brings her. And so that next generation of the littler kids are now starting to, which really makes it crazy.
It does. And it just adds a whole nother thing you have to plan for the party. What are they going to eat? Can they eat what we're eating? This is going to, right. Do we need activities? Like, I'm sure there's so many things there. So what are the, I guess, kind of the little details that you like to focus on that you feel like kind of set your parties apart?
I would say, right, in terms of what separates us is people seeing and understanding the organization that we have in terms of executing the party. Having a theme, right? Giving them, it's not just people showing up, having a drink, sitting down and chatting, right? We add more to the party in terms of a theme, in terms of games, in terms of, a specialty cocktail, which I love to have at any one gathering that we have. So I think when people recognize and remember, it's like, oh yeah, this party was so great because you did this, this, and this, right? I think that shows the fact on how prepped we are in terms of us together being so organized.
Yeah.
And Chris is being modest. His cocktails are legendary. He has signature cocktails. The presentation is very important. Goes all out with the rimmed glasses and the garnishments. He has signs about the cocktails and what's in them and what else there might be to drink, water, soda, whatever, wine, etc. And the decorations. He really does go all out for Christmas and for Halloween especially. And they are a highlight for the people. I mean, they're a reason for gathering, and they're really great, and people talk about them all the time. I guess some of the other things that I think is we are really into homemade food. We think it tastes better, makes people feel special. People who come to our parties are so generous and good that they always want to bring something. Yeah. And so, we can, coordinate that and then still have it all like homemade without having to do everything.
Yeah, I think to add to that, right? You never want one of your guests to say, "Oh my God, that was so good. How did you make that?"
Yeah.
"Oh, we bought it from Costco."
Exactly.
I mean, it's so much better. It's like, yeah, I found this recipe, whatever, right? And, these ingredients are, and I'll send it to you. I think that sounds so much better than, I bought that from Whole Foods or whatever, right? And then in terms, just getting back real quick to the cocktail, my motto in terms of the cocktail, it's all about presentation. It's not a matter of how it tastes; it's how it looks.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So,
Which, how it looks can affect how it tastes. If
Sure.
it looks good, it can
yes,
taste better.
yes, yes. And after 4 or 5, it tastes great.
There you go. Yeah.
That's how the people end up staying overnight. And many of the parties, but not all of them, we might have a game. So we're trying to involve the different generations, you know, so we'll play charades or Family Feud or Heads Up. Over time, I think our parties have become less formal.
Okay.
You know, every once in a while we get out, you know, like the nice plates and silver and china, but not very often anymore. And especially if we're having 30 or more people, which is often, it's just very difficult to seat everyone like that and to pass food. And it's just kind of crazy. Yeah. And for us, I think like during the party, we never stop moving. So it's not like the prep is one and done. We are always filling the ice buckets and wiping up, you know, just to make sure everything is okay, or changing the towels in the bathroom, you know, because they get all wet, and you know, refilling the cocktail cauldron or making sure there's enough bottles of wine out. Yeah. So it's constantly moving.
You know, you mentioned about games, right? I think one that we should bring up, right, that's a very simple game that everyone, you know, having any kind of gathering can do is with the safety pin.
Oh, the pins.
The pins.
Oh, yes. Okay. So it's a kind of an icebreaker game. So everybody gets a safety pin at the beginning of the party, and they put it on their clothing. And so then you start talking and mingling with people. And the idea is the person who has a pin, or everyone at the beginning, does not want to say the word no. Once the person says the word no, they have to give up their pin to whoever got them to say the word no. Okay. And so then people start getting 3 and 4 and 10 pins. And then at
all of a sudden it changes.
And then all of a sudden,
this person's got
then you can get the 10 pins if you can get that person to say no. And then there's usually some goofy gift at the end or something very small, but you know, something just kind of fun.
Sure.
And
yeah. During a conversation, which you're trying to target them. Right, but the younger generation, once they've gotten a bunch of pins, all of a sudden they disappear, right? Because they don't want to talk to anyone.
That's funny.
So that's kind of funny.
That is fun. I do notice that kids, when they see adults having fun at Christmas, we do what we call a dirty Santa. It's kind of like a white elephant gift, but you buy something, it's like $10 or less, and you don't mark who got it, but it's just in a pile, and so everybody picks something. But the kids have seen us do it, and so now they want to do it. So it is interesting when they watch you having fun that they're like, oh, we want to do this too, or can the kids do this? So I think it's a good point, and just like reminder for people to realize that kids are watching and others are watching, and it makes them, or doesn't make them, like want to join in. So,
and they really want to participate. So the teenagers and the young 20s, they really don't want to just sit in the basement and watch TV or play pool or whatever. They want to be part of it, but they don't necessarily know how to break in. And so if you invite them in and you start playing with them, then they're part of it. And then at the next party, they're telling you all about what's happening at school or with their job or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And that's as easy as giving them a safety pin to be a part of the game when they walk in the door.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what we're going to do before we kind of dive into kind of sharing about the details, how to plan for some of these parties, we're going to kind of ask Chris and Kathy like a little bit of a lightning round, kind of would you rather this or that? And then you can kind of, this will give you a feel for kind of how they like to celebrate, or what, you know, some of these, what makes a party easier. It'll be interesting just to hear what you think, your opinion. Okay.
Make sure that your answers are, are the same as mine.
Exactly, right? Okay, so I'll ask and then you can both answer, and then we'll dive into some of the details. Okay, so first, would you rather have homemade food or catered food?
Homemade.
Yeah, I would agree. It definitely homemade. But I think as, parties grow, we tend to try to, supplement with some catering, right? It just makes it a little easier. And say the appetizers are everything that we create at home versus, the main dish, whatever, right, coming from some local restaurant or that. But for the most part, the answer to that question is yes.
It's homemade. Yeah, and we kind of talked about that. So that one's the easy one. Okay. Okay, would you rather have themed parties or kind of casual and unstructured?
Themed.
Okay. Why do you think you like...
Well, I think they're a little bit different than just getting together then on a Friday or Saturday night. I think it also helps us focus on what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because if you're having a Cinco de Mayo party, you're going to have a Mexican food menu.
Yeah.
You can get a piñata for the kids. You know, you can come up with some margaritas. You know, so it helps, you know, what kind of napkins and plates to buy. It just really kind of gels it all together. And it's in putting together those little details that makes the party really kind of flow.
And I think from a guest point of view, it gives them more interest in coming to the party, right? If there's a theme, right, for which they can either, you know, dress up, or the fact is that they can, you know, if they're bringing a dish, whatever, right, that they're going to think about, well, what would go with this theme, whatever, right? So I think it just engages them a little even further.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think that's great. All right, we got a few more. Would you rather have a surprise party thrown for you or throw the party yourself?
Throw the party myself.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole nother. I've tried to surprise Kathy on multiple occasions, and it has not gone well. In time, when we reflect back on it, how great they were, but at the moment, no.
Now, is this part of your personality where you don't like to be surprised? You'd rather know? Do you think that's partially why?
I think it's definitely part of my personality. I think I'd probably be better at it now. When I was working, I was very much in my head about what had to be done every single day and every single week. And if someone was surprising me by taking me away for the weekend, that throws everything out of kilter. And it just, but you know,
with a limo.
Once I got in that limo and had that first cocktail, I forgot all about that board report I had to write.
Yeah. Well, and that's the hard thing when you surprise someone. You don't know what's on their schedule, what they have to do. So it can be tricky.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
What about you, Chris? Would you
I'm
rather?
Probably mixed.
Okay.
Right. I don't think I'm as structured as Kathy is in terms of not being flexible to be surprised. Right. You know, certainly, you know, I would probably maybe 60-40, like it to be an organized party versus a surprise, but I'm okay with that. Right?
Yeah. No, I can understand that. I feel like there's good and bad about both. So it really depends on the day, depends on the season of the year. It could depend on so many things. Yeah. All right. Would you rather large gatherings or intimate get-togethers?
We're kind of in the medium range, which I think is a cop-out. Sorry. We like intimate gatherings. I mean, we like it when we just have like one or two couples over. We like it. Many times it'll be just our own kids and our sister's family. That is always great. We wouldn't, I don't think, want a party for 75 or 100 people. That just is too hard to control, and you can't really do it right.
Yeah.
So where our sweet spot seems to be in the 30 to 45 range.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would say to add to that, right, whether it's 4 people or 40 people, I think the steps that we go through are just the same.
Yeah.
Right? Because you still need to have, you know, cocktails, you still need to have appetizers, you need, you know, decide on if you're going to have a main course or whatever, right? I mean, so it's pretty much still the same steps involved.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Okay, so the last one, would you rather be the guest or be the host?
This is going to sound really nuts, but I do like to host. I think part of it is I'm the oldest sister and the oldest grandchild, and I think that I want to carry on these things, and I think that if...
That's a difficult question, Michelle, because on one side, right, we love to host because we know the party is going to be great.
Of course.
Or to our, how about if I say not great, to our liking?
Yeah.
Okay, how about that?
Yeah.
But on the other side, right, we do like, it's like, thank God we don't have to do any of this work.
Yeah.
Right? So we do like to be guests just the same. So, you know, it's a toss-up, I'd say, in terms of answering that question.
Yeah. I think all of those, it can go either way. Yeah. And it is so funny when you say it depends or kind of in between. But honestly, like sometimes that is the answer because it really can depend.
I think we're really comfortable hosting. And I think that, you know, maybe when we're in the thick of it, we're like, wow, we need to have our head examined. But at the end, we're really happy that we did it and that we were able to do it, that we have the space and the funds to do it, and that we love bringing the people together, and
And it's
we do like to be guests though as well.
Yeah.
It's
and I think
nice
the
to
feedback
go other
that we get,
places.
right, from the guests that were at there. I mean, it just comes in.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it just shows you, that, our efforts putting into that party were not, were certainly noticed.
I think that it can be really fulfilling when you hear from people that they had a good time, what they enjoyed, and when you hear the memories, and when you're
Yes,
even,
absolutely.
sharing those memories and talking about them with people who were there. I could see that being really fulfilling and encouraging, and also like kind of part of who you are is like, oh, this is what we want. Like, this is what we want as part of our life. This is what we want in life and for others too. So
Sure.
I could see that. Okay. So now we're going to kind of start to shift and talk about, it's been so hard. I wanted to ask like all of these specifics as you were talking about your parties. But now we're going to start to talk about some of these details and kind of how you put a party together so people can kind of, if they're just starting to think about hosting, or maybe they're now trying to do this for their family and they're thinking, what do I do? Let's just kind of start big picture. So when you start to think, okay, Christmas is coming up or Halloween's coming up, what is it? How do you kind of start to have a formula? Do you have a formula kind of for planning parties?
I would say it always starts with a conversation, right? Do we want to entertain for, let's say it's Christmas, or, for this birthday, or for whatever gathering? It always starts with a conversation between Kathy and I. Then I think there's 4 main discussion points that we go through once we say, yes, we're going to do this, right?
Okay.
One is date and time. Right? When are we going to have it? And what time do we want it to kick off? Right? Then we want to talk about the guests. And certainly we want to check with the so-called, critical guests, like, our kids.
Yeah.
Right? So if they're going to be, we got to make
Yeah.
sure that they can show up, that they're free that particular day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Then it becomes, are we going to have a theme? Right? And what that theme is going to be and what it's going to entail. Right? And then the food and drink. Of course. What do we want to serve, right, in terms of appetizers, main course, cocktails, right? So I think it's those 4 items that we start those discussions with. And we may not have all the answers right away, but certainly it's stuff we got to start thinking about. So any other?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is we do sometimes have games or activities, and so
Sure.
we talk about
that
that,
could be a good fit. Yeah.
and we decide do we need to get anything? How how is that going to go?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. When you're thinking for example, the date and time of this, so let's say it's going to be a meal, and you've talked about how you have like appetizers, a meal, dessert. What is kind of like the span or the length of like a party? So when would you like probably have people come over so that, I'm just thinking that they're hungry enough to eat all of those things, those courses. And then when would it probably end, if it ever does?
Yeah, and that becomes part of that conversation. Right?
So
So usually Kathy is discussing. So go ahead.
Yeah, generally 4:00 start.
Okay.
4 to 6 o'clock would be drinks and appetizers. We think that is key to any good party. It gets something in their hand and in their tummy right away, and it gives people something to do while the others float in.
Of course, nobody's, always on time at 4 o'clock, or not everybody shows up.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. And generally aim for dinner around 6-ish, 6:30.
Okay.
Sometimes 7.
Sometimes it just really kind of depends. I try not to make it too late, but sometimes things slip off schedule.
Yeah.
Sometimes the meat doesn't want to cooperate. Right?
Exactly,
It's
yeah.
just is not at the
Right.
right temperature at
Right.
the time we need it.
Oh gosh, one of the learnings is, if you put 5 13x9 pans into the oven, it's going to take longer.
Yeah.
But that took me a while to really figure out how long that all takes. And it can take a long time with the,
Yeah.
substance.
Yeah.
And then dessert after. And then that way the older generation, can leave more like in the 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock range.
Yeah.
And then our generation or the next generation, generally can stay whatever till midnight or whatever. But it kind of gets the main portion of the party finished in about a 4 or 5 hour time span, so that those who need or want to leave can.
Yeah. So do you think, so if someone's saying, okay, I'm trying to set up the details, like the date, the time, is it helpful that then you would want to tell your guests kind of here's a start and end time if you have like hard and fast start and end times? Or if you're going to host, you need to just know that you have the rest of the night free because it may last, until then.
More the latter. So we generally start at 4. I usually, at least for the big family parties, the big holidays, say I'm targeting dinner at 6:30.
Okay.
So then people know, make sure, you're there. And they do well as far as getting there.
Yeah, we've never really.
And we never, ever have an end time.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that kind of lets people know they can go as they need to. And okay. No, that's good. All right. All right. So we have kind of the formula, the big thing. So then from there, you're kind of thinking, okay, what do we need to plan ahead? So you do you break each of those sections into kind of creating lists of things you need to buy or who's going to do what?
Yeah. I am a lot of to-do lists. Kind of the queen of list making.
Okay.
And I like to do it on paper because I like the feeling of crossing it off when I am done.
Yeah.
And I did this when I was working, and I do it now, is I break it into stages so that I can divide up the work.
Okay.
As mentioned a little bit earlier, we start, at least a week ahead getting supplies that you don't need. So you can go to Costco or you can get all your paper goods or, any games or activities or things like that. And then 3 or 4 days out, you can start getting your serving dishes, start decorating if you need to. And then 1 to 2 days out, you go get fresh groceries and food prep. So it's kind of a continuum.
Yeah.
And, then the day of the party and especially the last few hours before the party, that's when you really have to start, setting up the ice buckets and the drinks and the, making the appetizers.
Yeah. That makes sense. So it's kind of like stages. So then okay, these things are done. And then I moved. And I think that's helpful because then things are done and you have that checklist where you can cross off. So you're not forgetting things. Yeah. So that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, I too also create the list, a week in advance, whatever, right? In terms of all the items that I got to get done, whether it's going outside if it's an outdoor party, whatever, right? Blowing off the deck, right? Blowing out the walkway, whatever. Setting up, washing the furniture, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I typically will remember that, but, having a list is great just so you don't miss anything, right?
Yeah.
Buying ice, right? And the timing of all that, right? The day before you can get this done, this done, this done, this done. But then on the day of, setting up the bar, whatever, right? Making the specialty cocktail. And I think one of the keys to all this is to prep as much as you can ahead of time.
Yeah.
I think that's one critical element of a truly successful party that we can then enjoy ourselves is to prepping as much as you can ahead of time.
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely. 9x13 pans are my friends.
Yep. So you just buy them in bulk from Costco and then you have them. Yeah. That makes sense. And I'm thinking some things I feel like you could mix and then you put it, like if you're doing green bean casserole or something, you can kind of mix it, but then put the topping on, like the crispy onions on top. Like I'm sure everything kind of has stages depending on the dishes that you're making, I'm sure.
Or even an appetizer. You can make the base for the dip and then, put the other pieces together right before the people are coming. So there's a lot of steps you can do in advance.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love how it's kind of thinking about it and then having the different lists. It's not necessarily one big list of here's everything we need and need to do, but you're breaking it up into stages so and can kind of stay on top of it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and another item, right, because we've done this for so long and done it so many times, right, Kathy understands what, ultimately her responsibilities are. I kind of know what our responsibilities are. Not to say that we don't communicate, but she knows what she's got to take care of. I know what I've got to take care of. And so we basically, once we set this in motion, right, boom, we go off and we start doing what we need to do.
Yeah. So what do you guys normally each take care of? And then do you ask other guests or people who are coming, do you ask them to do certain things? So if you're asking them to bring food, are you setting up a spreadsheet so they can sign up, or are you just coordinating?
I'm the inside man. He's the outside man.
Okay.
And so, as mentioned, he takes care of all the outdoor decorations, anything to do with blowing off anything, the deck or the front walk or whatever it would be. Certainly all the drinks and the cocktails and all of that fall under Chris's bailiwick. I'm more on the food end of things. So when I send out the email announcing the party or invites or whatever they're going to be, people generally will offer to bring something, and then I tell them yes. One thing I definitely learned, though, is never give anyone a main dish or an essential side because things happen, and what if somebody can't come? The other thing is the people who are always late, I give them dessert. So I usually have people fill in with the appetizers and desserts. Every once in a while, I trusted, sister or bestie, could you bring a salad? That's important because I know that even if they're, not coming, they will get that there for me. So, there's.
Yeah, because if all of a sudden they've got something important to bring and they don't show up or they're going to show up late, what do you do?
Yeah.
Right. Certainly we don't have the ingredients at home and to compensate.
Yeah.
Right. So, we try to get creative.
Yeah.
So.
No, I think that's smart and just a good way to think about, what do I need to be sure I have? And those are probably the good things for you to make sure that you're doing and everybody else that may make it better or enhance it. Yeah. Okay. So what would you say is the difference between a holiday party and just like any other kind of party? Is there any difference between them or do you kind of think about them the same?
I would say in terms of how we prep and proceed, I mean, that conversation still has to take place, right? The 4 or 5 items that I talked about before, right, have got to occur, right? And so really it's more so, I mean, the theme is even there, right? Whether it's holiday, Christmas, or Halloween, or if it's a birthday party, there's still some kind of theme to it, right? So I would say generally that it's pretty much the same.
I agree. The process is the same. It would be the paper products and the games or the activity that would be different.
You might have gifts also, like at Christmas.
Yes,
then
right.
additionally, you're trying to figure out gifts to get. Yeah. Okay. So what would you say if there are things where you're like, these are the things that you need for a good party? Like if someone's thinking, what should I make sure that I'm doing? Are there things that you're like, you need to do this or you need?
I would say the main thing for us is to really make people feel relaxed and welcome and comfortable. So I think that's why we've drifted away from the more formal parties. We try to invite people, as we said, that either know each other or those who are really good at mingling and getting to know other people.
I'd say we try to keep the guests engaged. By having a theme, right? Keep them interested.
Yeah.
Right. Not just showing up, for food and drink and discussion, right? Yeah. No, give them something to focus in on.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that whether it's a game, whether it's outdoor decorations, something that they have that they can talk about. Did you see that he's got such and such outside? Right. And so I think that all helps with the flow of the party. So
yeah, gives them something to talk about. That's fun. Okay. We've talked about all these great parties, because every party is going to be great. It's going to go on however it does, right? But but so now when you think back to, okay, what are parties where things have not gone, and maybe these were like some of your early on parties, and now you're like, well, we've learned, so that doesn't happen anymore. But kind of talk us through like mistakes you've made, what have you learned? And you've talked about a few of these, but is there any others you'd add?
Do you mean like the Christmas day we had a fire in the oven?
Oh, yeah, like that. Oh, my. What happened there?
Well, one of the things I've learned is that when you're making a casserole dish, whether it's a potato dish, a vegetable dish, or whatever, if I have it, I'm going to put it right up to the top of the Pyrex or whatever.
Yeah.
And until this happened, I did not put a cookie sheet under it.
Yeah.
And so one Christmas day, we're trying to keep everything together. We got about 30 people in the house. It's relatively chaotic. The appetizers and drinks are flowing. Everything's going well. And I'm trying to get all the sides done. And all of a sudden, I notice in the oven, something's on fire. And Chris came and he went to open the door.
Yeah.
Luckily, my uncle was a fireman on the Chicago Fire Department, and he leaped off the couch, and he ran and he slammed the door shut and said, no. And so the funniest part is that we let it calm down. I put the cookie sheet under, turned the oven back on, and kept cooking. Because that is one thing we've learned is you just have to roll with this stuff. Yeah. If your meat won't cook, if your sides are taking forever, if, something breaks or, and that's the thing too. Somebody breaks a glass or they feel so terrible. Look, it's a glass. Don't worry about it. Just don't get hurt. Let's, try to fix that up. But
one 4th of July party, right? All of a sudden, I can't remember what time it was in the evening, right? But I think it was almost dark, and we're all sitting around having a good time, whatever, right? And then all of a sudden, lights in several rooms in the house all of a sudden go out. I'm like, God, I can't imagine blew a circuit breaker, right? So immediately I go downstairs, open up the breaker box, whatever, right? And I look, and everything looks fine, right? So what ends up happening is that we lost half the power to our house. I guess in talking with the ComEd people later, right, there's 2 lines that run into everyone's house.
Okay.
And somehow one of the lines off the electrical, power cord or whatever, right, failed, right? So we lost half the power. So what do you do, right? Number one, you move people from a dark room into the lighted room, right? But with any, craziness that can occur at a gathering, I always fall back to, all right, who needs another cocktail?
It's like flashlights, cocktails.
So regardless of what happens, the oven goes on fire, right? We lose half the power to the house. As long as the cocktails are flowing, people will stay entertained.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to remember is as much planning as you do, something can always happen, and it's just rolling with it. And probably, would you say if you're worried about a dish breaking, don't use it at that, you shouldn't be using it, right?
Right.
If you really care that much.
Right. I try not to ever try a new recipe for a party because I don't want to have to think about the steps. And if we haven't tasted it before, I'm not really sure what it's going to be. If I'm going to make something really complicated that we love, I bring it to somebody else's party.
Okay.
It's a lot easier to bring one multi-step appetizer someplace else than to try to do that when you're already making 5 others. So, we try to do things like that. Yeah. And I would say there's one thing you always have to do. After the party, check the food warmer.
You talk about legendary stories. Oh my God. This one lives on and continues to grow year after year after year. Please.
My sister had a graduation party for one of her daughters. Sadly, forgot that some of the food was in the warmer and went on vacation.
Oh.
To return only to a house that was full of flies. And she would say to me, Kath, got a lot of flies in my house. And I'm like, you better investigate. So they investigated everywhere. They looked behind the oven. They looked everywhere.
And how long did that investigation take? A couple weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
A couple weeks. So, lo and behold.
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden, I think it was Greg that decided to open up the warmer.
Food warmer.
Whatever, right? And oh my God,
not
what
pretty.
he saw was just, right? So he basically took the whole thing. Yep. Pyrex and all, threw it in a garbage bag, whatever, right, and out it went.
Yep. The black bag walks out of the house.
So, that story just continues to live on.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, my God.
That's funny. But I'm sure, it is all of those things, because once everyone's eaten, once everyone's having fun, there is a point where you're kind of like, all right, we're done, and you want to sit and relax.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah. But things like that, or something gets left on and is now dehydrated in the crock pot or something, I'm sure stuff like that. Yeah. That's great, though. All right. Well, if you think about any more of those, any mistakes or what you've learned, see, the thing is people listening are like, oh, of course, but they're all also thinking, oh, I should probably put a pan under that dish. I mean, that's the thing, in honesty. Okay. So so you have all this planning. How do you kind of budget for this? Do you set an amount? Do you break it out by item?
That's a very good question. And I would say, because Kathy and I are both accountants, right, we really don't put together a budget. I mean, we certainly are frugal in some sense. And in this particular case, when we're doing these gatherings and that, we just know not to break the bank. Yeah. Right. I think over time, right, 20 some years ago, we may have served like $2 chuck. Yeah. Right. Today, we serve something probably a little better. But we've never really itemized a list on what we just generally understand what it is that we can buy and, and not to go overboard. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. I think we both have a pretty good idea about what would be reasonable for a party of whatever nature it is. Yeah. And if we're going to go outside of that, we would definitely talk about it before going and purchasing something or deciding.
With your family might be a little more expensive. My family would go a little more cheaper.
Oh, that's not true.
Yeah, it depends, right?
But some holidays are different. So at Christmas, we tend to have a big beef roast and maybe some nicer wine. Okay. 4th of July, we're eating sliders and pulled pork sandwiches. Yeah. So it just kind of depends. And if it's something like a really big occasion, like when we had our older daughter's rehearsal dinner, I mean, we had a pig roast. And so we had that catered in. And so that was definitely something that we all talked about, ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, that's really fun though. And it does depend on what it is and what can people bring or what do we need to have catered, I'm sure. Okay. Yeah. No, that's helpful. All right. Well, an important part of every party are the guests. Mm-hmm. So as you're thinking about who to invite or what groups of people this is for, what would you kind of say, I guess, what kind of people are your favorite guests? So what are kind of characteristics or qualities of people who make great guests?
I think people who are good at mingling and willing to talk with all the other guests are fabulous. I think storytellers or people who have just taken an interesting, trip or have a new house or a new baby or a new job. That's always, nice to have people like that. Just on some of the details, I mean, please don't show up early.
That's good.
Show up on time or fashionably late. I mean, don't come an hour or too late either. Yeah. But we are running around that last half hour, really trying to, put the finishing touches on, and we can roll with it.
Yeah, we can roll, because one instance, I don't remember what the party was for, but we did have guests show up who remain nameless, right? Show up an hour early, because they thought that the party started, say, at 3 versus 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So what do? We just roll with it. We get them a cocktail and say, don't mind us, that, one of us has still got to take a shower. The other one's prepping, whatever, right? Just, enjoy.
Yep.
So
you can put them to work, right? Come early, we'll put you to work.
And I think we mentioned that we have very good people who bring something and always want to offer.
Yeah.
But as a host, I love it when people do that. But it's very difficult if they call the day of the party or the day before the party. Because by then I've already bought it and I probably already made it. So offers are great, but if you could do it maybe a week so I can actually fit it into my real menu, that'd be great.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing. Like, I know some people that they're kind of like, okay, I have to go to this party. And they kind of dread it because maybe they aren't someone who, likes to talk or, doesn't know how to really well. But then once they get there, they're like, oh, it's not that bad. So I think even just reminding people, hey, you're going to have a great time just going, but also asking in advance. And I think some of what you guys do helps people like that too, because if they don't necessarily like mingling or talking and they don't know what they're going to talk about, but there's a theme, for example, they know like that gives them something. So I think that can actually help some people.
And most of our parties are pretty casual. So it's more groups of people standing around talking in various rooms of our house. It's not as if everyone's just sitting around, waiting for the next person to say something. So if you're the quiet type, you can just kind of float around the house and not necessarily really mingle and get involved with any conversation.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question. TV on or off, or does it matter? And does it matter like what's on?
I would say it's always on.
But
people aren't glued to it.
It's always on. It depends, number one, on your guests, right? Because some, like to have. I mean, if there's some sporting event, right, we'll certainly have it on. Right? If it's on a Sunday, right, there's football games playing. Of course, we're going to have it on, even if it's Saturday and there's some, number 1 versus number 2 college game going on, right? We're going to have, because someone's going to be interested in it. Now. Will I have it on mute and just the TV on? And then I would prefer then to have music playing. Fine, you want to watch it? That's great, but I would prefer to have this particular station on playing music, right, to help with the ambiance throughout the house, right? Now, occasionally I'll have that guest. It's like, can we really turn the volume on? I'd like to hear it. Of course, we're going to accommodate to that. But, but typically, and then if it's something else where it's just there's nothing going on, I won't turn it on for background. No. I think music is key just to create more of an environment, and it's not silent if no one's talking, right? There's always something.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. What's the worst experience you've had with a bad guest? Have you ever had any?
Our guests are fabulous on the whole. I would say the only time I can recall that we have is when you've got elementary school children who are unsupervised and start to play with your decorations, either indoor or outdoor, or decide that they're going to joust with your pool sticks, or throw your darts not into the dartboard but into the walls of the house. That isn't our favorite.
Yeah. Yep. That makes sense.
And they're not doing it malicious. I mean, you know,
Right,
they're just
exactly.
unsupervised, and
Yep.
yeah, and then you know, we'll find it the next day, and we'll be like, whoa.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
The
we've
next
never, I think, had to ask a guest to leave the
No,
party.
no.
Yeah.
Occasionally, we'll have a guest that maybe is a little bit overserved, and we might have to hold their hand through the remainder of the night,
Mm-hmm.
keep a watch on them,
Mhm.
whatever, right? Just to
Yeah.
make sure that things don't go south,
Mhm.
right? So we might have to babysit them in a particular way,
Mhm.
right? But certainly, we've never had a guest that we've had to escort out
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
house.
No, that makes sense.
But be prepared. You can have a few guests that you now got to spend a little more time with,
Mhm.
just so that you can make it through the rest of the evening.
Yeah. Well, I think that was something kind of in preparing for this that you guys had said, like, hey, always have like that guest room ready in case someone needs to stay over. So, yeah. Oh, that's great.
Got a lot of air mattresses.
Yeah, right? Exactly. All right. So we kind of talked about like your some of the favorite guest qualities. Is there like what do you wish people knew about being a good guest? Some of those probably tie to this, but is there anything else that you would kind of add to that?
You know, come with a good attitude, right? And be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because again, you know, certainly things don't always go according to plan,
Mm-hmm.
right? And most of our guests, right, are long-term guests that we've invited year after year,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're willing to come with a great attitude, willing to have fun,
Yeah.
want to mingle with people, whatever, right? And just, you know, go with the flow. Whatever turns out will turn out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that helps people even because sometimes we don't think we're coming as the guest. We're not the host and planning everything, but as the guest, you make an impact on the party. So this hopefully reminds people, hey, if you're going to a party, go have fun.
You know, these great expectations of what's going to occur at what particular time and all that, because it's never going to occur that way.
All right. So as we kind of start to wrap up, I guess we've talked a lot about this throughout the episode. And it's interesting in talking. I feel like we've kind of pulled out some of these themes of why these parties are so important. You know, it could seem silly. Like this is just a party that we plan and it seems like fun, but there's actually so much behind it that's happening that you don't even realize, like we've talked about. So how would you say kind of like in hosting parties, how do you feel like it's enriched your lives? You know, if there's anything we haven't covered, and then why do you continue hosting parties?
Well, I think it's definitely enriched our lives. We do like to bring people together. Even when we were working, we wanted to do this. I mean, one of the reasons that I think, you know, we worked so hard was that we could bring people together, you know, whether it is a party like this or a family vacation or just going out with people to, you know, lunch or dinner or something, because we want to be with people, have those traditions. We want to create an environment where people feel comfortable and want to be there and be themselves and relax and
Michelle,
have
how
fun.
many times have you spoken it yourself? We've certainly spoken it. It's like, yes, we should get together, right, with family or friends, and,
Yes.
and then you never do,
Yep.
right? So by us doing this, right, we bring that collective together, right, so that we continue to keep up to date with our friends and our family and that. So it's not just a once-a-year occurrence or God forbid that you only see them at funerals.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We'd like, because those are morbid times and sort of sorrowful times, right? We'd like to keep the same people coming back together, you know, friends and family and that, so that we can keep that bond together.
Yeah.
And I think just hosting over many years and having all sorts of things happen, it kind of teaches you that, you know what, everything is not going to be perfect. I mean, not just at a party, but just in life. And you have to be able to go, okay, you know, that's all right. We're going to roll. We're going to change. We're going to be flexible. And it's still going to be okay because you met your end objective, which was to try to get the people together.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. I think one of the things, too, that you guys are really doing is you're sharing what you have with others, you know, in providing food, in hosting your home. You're using everything that you have, you know, to share with others. And so I think that's just so fun. Like there's so much happening. There's so much, I think, that is fulfilling from that. that hopefully as you guys continue to host, you have so many great memories, and other people do too because of what you're doing. There's the people who host and take action and say we're having a party, and then there's the people that are waiting for those people to host parties.
Oh, sure, absolutely. And we talk about that amongst ourselves, right, Kathy and I, about those particular types of people and that. But we still love to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Bottom line is that we are those type of people that get everyone together, and we enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, any crazy stories or parties that we've left out that you guys want to be sure? Any final reminders to people that you feel like we haven't mentioned? I think this has been really helpful for people to kind of hear why it's important, and then also here's a great way to think about starting to do it yourself.
Yeah. Well, I always say start with the end objective in mind. And the objective is to pull people together that you love and to spend time with them. And after that, I would say prep as much in advance as you can, because like that wedding or anything else, it just goes so fast. And you're busy trying to coordinate the party as well as talk with people. And if anything goes wrong, try not to panic. Don't let it ruin your party or your attitude. Just kind of roll with it.
Right, and if you've got great friends and family, they will roll with it as well, right? And so you don't necessarily need to make it absolutely perfect. Yeah, and communication is critical, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's made us successful in terms of doing that. So
yeah, I think this has been so fun. I hope everybody's enjoying just the stories, and hopefully, and I'm sure people are thinking of stories that they've had, like that fire you mentioned, things like that. I'm sure they're like, yep, we had that, or the smoke going through the house. So I think this is great even to help people think through and maybe remember some memories that they've had. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Chris and Kathy. Yeah, this has been so fun. Thank you everyone for listening. We hope that this episode gives you some practical tips for the holiday season, whether you're hosting or attending. This episode is just another way we're trying to help you take our tagline, Designed for Life, seriously. Your finances should be structured so that you can live a full life. Hosting is just one of the many ways you can do this. So until the next episode, happy holidays.
Thanks for listening. To find any links or resources related to this episode, check out our show notes. Your host was Michelle Smallenberger, a certified financial planner and CEO. The guests featured are from Financial Design Studio, a team of experienced, fiduciary, fee-only advisors based in Chicago. Anna Lewis is the executive producer of the Behind the Designs podcast. And as always, for more information about Financial Design Studio and who we are, check out our website, financialdesignstudio.com. And final note, no content discussed on this podcast should be taken as financial advice. Financial Design Studio accepts no responsibility for your individual choices. We'll see you in the next episode.